The art of Horizon Zero Dawn has concept art from various stages of the design process and a fair amount of commentary from the developers. Overall, though, it's just an average video game art book. This review will cover the quality of the physical book itself, the content of the book, the aesthetics, and the nostalgia evoked by the book. I'll also talk about how it provides insight into the game's development. Let's start with the quality of the physical book. It's 9 inches wide by 12 inches high. It has 192 pages. The quality of the covers and pages is pretty average. It comes with a dust jacket that is, as usual, less cool than the normal book cover. And I'd say the quality of the images, the printing, is probably a bit above average. Alright, on to the contents of the book, starting with the image variety. It has concept sketches, finalized concept art, finalized prop designs. There are a few things like monotone concepts that show the shape of the landscape. There's also some images that show how they developed what the decay and regrowth might look like in the world. So though there's some variety in the images, it's mostly what looks like finalized concept art. As for how the book is organized, I think it's organized a little weird. It's organized by tribe. So there's a section on the Nora tribe with locales, buildings, weapons, people, etc. for that tribe, and then it moves on to another tribe. And I guess that makes some sort of sense, but it's kind of a strange way to organize a book about Horizon. The tribes aren't really the main focus of the game. I would have just had a large section on the environments, which would include each tribe, a section on the machines, a section on the weapons and armor, and a section on the characters. I think it might have been more interesting to be able to compare similar items from one tribe to another. So for example, there'd be clothing from each tribe in close proximity so you can compare the design decisions. I suppose this is mostly just a matter of preference, though. Is there writing or insight from the artists and developers themselves? Yeah, it's all throughout the book. For example, here they talk about how, as time went on, they realized they needed to place an increasing emphasis on Aloy's hair, because she needed to be easily identifiable in a variety of clothing and armor. A lot of the remarks from the developers act as a sort of tour guide for the images, which is something I really like in video game art books. It adds a lot more to the viewing experience. There's also some commentary that isn't attributed to the developers, but I think it might actually be from them, or from a design document of some sort. As for the quality of the writing, the book's author is Paul Davies, who's the same guy who did the Assassin's Creed 4 art book. His writing is generally fine, but some entries feel repetitive or not very important, or sometimes a bit dramatic. Strangely, I quite like the substance of the writing from the author, but didn't really think there was anything exceptional about the writing itself. That might sound kind of weird, but I can't really think of a better way to describe it. Some of it reminds me of a textbook. There's interesting information, but not much personality. The more I read the book and think about it, the more I'm convinced of a theory of mine, which is that the author had access to design documents and based the writing off of them. From a Killzone book I have, it appears that Guerrilla Games develops a sort of development Bible that describes and guides their design philosophies for the entire game, and staff members reference it all the time. The Killzone book has direct excerpts from such a book, and the commentary is great. In this book, the author seems to have looked at the development Bible and written almost a direct quote from it, but it's still apparently using his own words? I would have preferred to just read the excerpts from whatever he's reading. I mean, it's impossible to know if that's what's really going on, but I do think it's a pretty reasonable guess. There's almost 2 different voices in the book, and I think I can tell which captions are mostly from the development Bible and which ones are from the author. Well, all this said, the vast majority of the writing is useful, and it gives context for the images in that section. Alright, here we go. The section of the book reviews I personally find the most important. Does this book have what you want it to have? Okay, so you've played Horizon Zero Dawn, and you've discovered that there's an art book based on the game. What would you hope to find in it? For me, I'd want a heavy emphasis on the environments and the machines, since these are the major aspects of the game. Ideally, there'd be a lot of commentary on why they designed the machines the way they did. Well, while there's a good amount of artwork on the environments, there's actually not much focus on the machines, which is perplexing to me. They're a major part of the gameplay and story, and they're probably the thing that make the game stand out from every other game out there. On this page, we see that there's likely all sorts of existing artwork on each machine. It is simply beyond me that this section doesn't contain a featurette on each and every machine. How they were designed, why they were designed that way, the challenges in designing them, and so on. It seems like the most obvious thing in the world to include in this book. I personally think the issue is that the author was mentally stuck in the design Bible and how it is structured. But in doing that, he ultimately neglected one of the main parts of the game. I mean, a Horizon Zero Dawn book without much emphasis on the machines? This type of thing is literally the whole reason my reviews have a section called, "Does it have what you want it to have?" It's very, very disappointing. One reason I was really looking forward to seeing a lot of commentary and design work on the machines is because in Killzone Visual Design, it mentions how the design team is meticulous in designing mechanical objects and designs them in a realistic way. I think that's actually one of the main strengths of the machine designs in the game, and why the combat gameplay is so satisfying and engaging. Well, sadly, I'm left with basically none of the things I was looking forward to. If it were up to me, I'd honestly like it if more than half the book were about the machines. And if anyone out there is listening, I think you could probably release another book that focuses solely on the design of each machine. By the way, while I was just talking, I showed you everything in this book about the machines. One last thing about this, even though the rant is over. Well, here it mentions that the machine designers consulted with a robotics expert and even designed functional skeletal systems for each machine. And while that little tidbit is nice to read, it's also disappointing that that's all the book says about this. I mean, there's bound to be so much more interesting information connected with that little blurb. But we don't get any of it. Well, to summarize the content section, there's some good stuff in this book, but the omissions are quite glaring. It is well below average as far as content is concerned. Alright, on to the aesthetics. I like that some of the pieces of art aren't just put on a white background, but that some effort has gone into making the presentation more aesthetically pleasing, like this soft blue background with a symbol from the game. Not every page is like this, but it's a nice change. As usual, though, this book would have benefited from being in a wide format rather than a tall one, because it would enable the images to be displayed more prominently. The publisher actually did a pretty good job overall with the aesthetics, but a number of the images are chopped up by the book crease, or the seam, or whatever it's called. There's a lot of full pages of art, and I think it really contributes to a good aesthetic overall. As for the quality of the art, well, a lot of it's quite nice and painterly, but a fair amount of it has a sort of image database cut and paste look, which I actually don't mind that much, but it does feel a bit more sterile than art that's less digital. In general, though, I will say that I really like the look of the images. It's just a really nice, pleasant presentation. I think the book itself looks pretty cool, and I like that the cover doesn't have any writing. It has a matte texture to it, which is nice. The front and back inside covers are also pretty cool, as the same scene pre- and post-apocalypse. Overall, I think the aesthetics are pretty good. How about the nostalgia factor? I do think that nostalgia is hampered somewhat by the organization of the book. It's organized by tribe, but the tribes aren't really a major focus of most of the gameplay, or really even of the main story. The two main story threads are what happened to the world and where did Aloy come from. The main gameplay aspects are taking down machines with a bow and other weapons, and though there's some content on both of these topics, neither one of them is very strongly presented in this book. There are images, though, here and there, that for me reminded me of memorable parts of the game. And though some of the environments in the book ultimately didn't make it into the game, just seeing them I did want to explore them, and I felt that sense of adventure that the game gives. I'd read at some point that the game world was originally something like 50 times larger than it is now, and a lot of the images look like they were drawn with this much larger game world in mind. I couldn't help but think about how fun it would be to explore some of these larger locales. Well, all things considered, I think this book does a pretty average job at evoking nostalgia. Alright, what kinds of things does the book reveal about the game's development? Well, as noted previously, there's a number of excerpts from the artists themselves about what they created and what factors they considered while they were designing things. There's a number of details that I didn't notice while playing, like how the Banuk decorate themselves with machine parts in order to be one with them. And on the other hand, how the Eclipse decorate themselves with military props, like shell casings. I thought that the comments that are directly from the developers, and the ones that probably are, add a lot of context to the way that the developers think, and about how they approach something when they're creating it from scratch. Well, from another art book I happen to know that many of the artists with Gorilla are industrial designers. I imagine that has something to do with why the machine designs are so interesting and functional. However, this book doesn't have anything in it about that. I wonder what other interesting tidbits there are about this game that we simply don't know about because they weren't put in the book. Another missed opportunity. Well, in closing, there's a lot to like about this book, and a lot of the commentary is interesting and informative. But there's also a lot that's not in the book, and that's a shame. Different people want different things in video game art books, but I hope this review has been helpful in showing you what you can expect from this book. If you have any complaints about this video, please don't hesitate to contact my customer support center.